The moment I saw my name on that lawyer's letter, I knew my life was about to change. But I never imagined that the grandmother I'd never met had left me everything, or that the family who discarded me like garbage would come crawling back. Hands outstretched, faces twisted with greed. My name is Elena Rossi. And this is the story of how the people who called me worthless learned that sometimes the trash you throw away turns out to be treasure. I was 29 years old, working double shifts at a diner in Queens when the certified letter arrived. My hands were still greasy from the morning rush, and I almost didn't open it. Legal correspondence never meant anything good in my world. Ms. Elena Rossi, you are hereby notified that you have been named as the sole beneficiary in the estate of Mrs. Vittoria Rossi. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss the settlement of her estate. Valued at approximately $47 million, I read it 3 times. Then I sat down on my apartment steps, barely more than a fire escape, with delusions of grandeur, and read it again. $47 million from a grandmother I'd never met. A woman whose existence my mother had mentioned exactly once, in passing, years ago, before the cancer took her. Your grandmother, she'd whispered from her hospital bed, her voice paper thin. She lives in Italy. She's very particular about family. We had a falling out before you were born. That was all she'd said. All she'd had the strength to say. 3 days later, she was gone, and I was 18, alone, and drowning in medical debt I'd spend the next decade trying to pay off. Now, 11 years later, this woman, this stranger, had left me everything. The lawyer's office was in Manhattan, the kind of building where even the doorman's suit probably cost more than my monthly rent. I wore my best dress, which wasn't saying much, and tried not to feel like an imposter. Mr. Chen, the attorney, was a small man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He gestured for me to sit in a leather chair that probably cost more than my car. Miss Rossi, he began, sliding a thick folder across his mahogany desk. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman. She built an empire from nothing: real estate, investments, a restaurant chain. She was exacting in her standards. I nodded, unsure what to say. She had one child, your mother, Lucia. When Lucia married your father against her wishes, Mrs. Rossi cut her off completely. No contact, no support, nothing. The words hit me like a slap. My mother had struggled every day of her life. We'd lived in apartments with holes in the walls, eaten pasta for nights a week because it was cheap, and my mother had worked herself to exhaustion. All while this woman, her mother, had millions. Why? The word came out sharp, angry. Why would she do that? Mr. Chen's expression softened with something that looked like pity. Your father came from a poor family. Mrs. Rossi believed he was after Lucia's inheritance. She gave Lucia an ultimatum: leave him or lose everything. My mother chose love. I whispered. She did. And your grandmother never forgave her. He paused, weighing his words carefully. But something changed in the last year. Mrs. Rossi hired investigators to find you. She learned about your mother's death, about your struggles, about the debt you've carried. In her final months, she expressed regret. Not enough regret to reach out while she was alive, I thought bitterly. Not enough to help when my mother was dying. The estate is substantial, Mr. Chen continued. The villa in Tuscany, properties in Milan and Rome, the restaurant chain, investments. All of it goes to you. With one condition. Of course there was a condition. You must go to the villa in Tuscany and meet with your extended family, your mother's siblings and their children. Mrs. Rossi wanted you to know them before you decide what to do with her legacy. My mother's siblings, the family who'd never once reached out, never sent a card when she died, never acknowledged my existence, and if I refuse, the estate goes to charity. All of it. I stared at the folder, at the papers that represented more money than I could comprehend. I thought about my cramped apartment, the debt collectors I was still dodging, the double shifts that left my feet aching and my soul empty. When do I leave? The villa sat on a hillside in Tuscany, surrounded by vineyards and olive groves that stretched toward the horizon like something from a painting. As my taxi wound up the long drive, I pressed my face against the window. Unable to believe this place was real, the house itself was magnificent honey-colored stone, terracotta roof, climbing roses that framed every window. This was where my grandmother had lived, where my mother had grown up before she chose love over luxury. A woman stood on the front steps, arms crossed, watching my arrival with cold calculation. She was in her 50s, beautiful in that sharp, expensive way, wearing clothes that screamed wealth and taste. "So," she said as I climbed out of the taxi, "you're Lucia's bastard." I stopped, my bag halfway out of the trunk. The driver, an older Italian man who'd been cheerfully pointing out landmarks the whole drive, went silent. "Excuse me?" "Oh, don't pretend to be offended." The woman descended the steps with the grace of someone who'd never questioned her place in the world. "I'm Bianca, your mother's younger sister. And you, apparently, are here to steal what should have been mine. I didn't ask for any of this, no. You just conveniently existed while mother was dying and feeling guilty." Bianca's smile was sharp as glass. "Tell me, did you even know she existed? Or were you too busy scraping by in America?" The taxi driver cleared his throat. "Signorina, your bag?" I paid him, tipping generously because I could now a thought that sent a surreal thrill through me and turned back to Bianca. "My mother never told me about any of you. I found out about my grandmother from a lawyer's letter. So whatever you think I've done, whatever game you think I'm playing, you're wrong, we'll see." Bianca turned and walked back into the villa. "Dinner is at 8. Try not to embarrass yourself." The room they'd given me was stunning: high ceilings, antique furniture, windows that overlooked the vineyard, a 4-poster bed with linens softer than anything I'd ever touched, an ensuite bathroom with a clawfoot tub that looked like it belonged in a museum. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried not to cry. This could have been my mother's life. This beauty, this comfort, this ease. Instead, she died in a county hospital, her hands rough from years of cleaning houses, her face lined with worry about bills we couldn't pay. And for what? For loving my father? For choosing him over this? A knock at the door interrupted my spiral. "Yes?" A young woman entered, maybe 25, with dark curls and uncertain eyes. "Hi, I'm Julia, Bianca's daughter, so I guess that makes us cousins?" She said it like a question, like she wasn't sure if I'd accept the relation. "Elena," I stood, wiping my eyes quickly. "Sorry, I'm just overwhelmed." Julia smiled, but it was sad around the edges. "I would be too. This whole situation is insane. That's one word for it." She glanced over her shoulder, then stepped fully into the room and closed the door. "Listen, I need to tell you something. My mother and uncles, they're furious about the will. They thought they'd inherit everything. When Nana's lawyer read the will and said it all went to you," she shook her head. "It wasn't pretty. I didn't know her. I didn't even know she existed." "I know. But they don't care about that. They care about the money." Julia moved closer, her voice dropping. "Be careful at dinner. They're going to try to manipulate you, maybe even scare you into signing everything over. Don't let them." "Why are you telling me this?" She was quiet for a moment, her eyes distant. "Because Nana talked about you. In the end, before she died, she talked about Lucia all the time. About how wrong she'd been, how proud she was that Lucia had chosen love, how she wished she'd been brave enough to apologize before it was too late." Julia's eyes glistened. "She said you were the only one who deserved her legacy because you understood what really mattered." My throat tightened. "She never met me. She knew you anyway. A grandmother knows." Julia squeezed my hand. "Don't let them take this from you. You earned it, just by being Lucia's daughter." Dinner was held in a formal dining room that could have seated 20. Crystal chandeliers, oil paintings of stern ancestors, a table that gleamed with polish. I felt like I'd stepped into a period drama. Besides Bianca and Julia, there were 3 others. Marco and Alessandro, my mother's brothers, both in their 40s with the kind of casual arrogance that came from never questioning their privilege. And Alessandro's wife, Francesca, a brittle woman with too much jewelry and calculating eyes. "So," Marco said as we sat down, his tone deceptively pleasant. "Elena, tell us about your life in America." "I work at a diner." "Nothing glamorous." "A diner? Francesca's lips curled with barely disguised contempt. How charming. Francesca, Julia said sharply. What? I'm just making conversation, but her eyes said otherwise. Alessandro leaned back in his chair, studying me like I was a specimen under glass. I have to ask, did you know? About Mother? About all of this? No, really? Because the timing is awfully convenient. She gets sick, suddenly you appear, and then poof, you inherit everything. My hands clenched in my lap. I didn't know she existed until the lawyer's letter. I didn't ask for any of this, but you're keeping it, Bianca said softly, dangerously. Aren't you? The room went silent. Everyone was watching me, waiting. I haven't decided. Liar. Marco's pleasant facade cracked. You saw all those zeros on the paperwork and nearly wet yourself. Don't pretend you're noble. You're just like your mother, taking what doesn't belong to you. I stood so fast my chair scraped against the floor. My mother didn't take anything. She was cut off for loving someone you all deemed beneath her. She spent her life working herself to exhaustion, and she died drowning in debt because she couldn't afford decent health care. So don't you dare it down, Bianca commanded. No, I was shaking now, years of anger and grief pouring out. You want to know what I think? I think you're all cowards. Your mother made a mistake, a cruel, heartless mistake, and instead of making it right, you all just went along with it. You watched your sister struggle and did nothing. You let her die alone because it was easier than defying Vittoria. You know nothing about our family, Alessandro said coldly. I know everything I need to. I know my mother chose love over money, and I know she never regretted it. Can any of you say the same? Silence. Then Francesca laughed, sharp and bitter. Oh, this is precious. The poor American girl with her wounded pride and moral superiority. Tell me, Elena, if you are so noble, why are you here? Why didn't you tell the lawyer to give it all to charity? Because I'm tired, I wanted to scream. Because I'm so tired of struggling, of working myself sick, of never having enough. Because maybe, just maybe, I deserve something good after everything I've been through. But I didn't say any of that. I'm here, I said quietly, because your mother asked me to be. And unlike the rest of you, I'm going to respect her last wishes. I left the dining room without another word. Julia's whispered, good for you. Following me into the hallway, I found the garden by accident, following a stone path that wound behind the villa. It was twilight, that magical hour when everything turns gold and purple, and the air smells like flowers and earth and possibility. The garden was wild and beautiful, roses climbing ancient walls, herbs growing in neat rows, a fountain gurgling softly in the center. And in the corner, almost hidden by jasmine, I found it, a small grave marker, simple and elegant. Lucia Rossi, beloved daughter, may she rest in peace. He dropped to my knees, my hand touching the cool stone. My mother's name. Here, in this place she'd left behind so many years ago. She had it made a month before she died. I jumped. Julia stood behind me, her expression gentle. Nana did? My voice cracked. Julia nodded, sitting beside me on the grass. She couldn't make it right with Lucia. Your mother was already gone. But she wanted something, some acknowledgement that Lucia had existed, that she'd mattered. Tears streamed down my face. It's not enough. No, it's not. Julia wrapped an arm around my shoulders. But maybe it's something. We sat there as night fell. And for the first time since my mother died, I didn't feel quite so alone. The next morning, I went to Mr. Chen's local representative, a sharp-eyed woman named Signora Martinelli who worked from an office in the nearby town. I need to understand exactly what I've inherited, I told her. Everything. She spread the documents across her desk with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. The villa and surrounding land. 3 restaurants, 2 in Milan, 1 in Rome. 4 apartment buildings in Florence. Stock portfolios, investments, bonds, and this. She pushed forward a separate folder. A foundation your grandmother established for young women pursuing education. She wanted you to oversee it. I stared at the papers, overwhelmed. Why me? She never even met me. Perhaps that's exactly why. You weren't tainted by the family politics, the expectations, the disappointments. Signora Martinelli leaned back, studying me. Your grandmother made many mistakes, Miss Rossi, but in the end, she understood what mattered. Family isn't just blood, it's the love you choose, the sacrifices you make, the bridges you build or burn. What would you do? If you were me? She smiled. I'd ask myself what would honor both women, your grandmother, who built all this, and your mother, who walked away from it. Then I'd do that. I spent the next week exploring. I visited the restaurants, spoke with managers, learned about the businesses my grandmother had built from nothing. I met with the foundation board, listened to stories about young women whose lives had been changed by scholarships, and I avoided my family, until the night Alessandro cornered me in the villa library. We need to talk, he said. Closing the door behind him, I set down the book I'd been reading, one of my mother's favorites. I'd discovered still on the shelf after all these years. Do we? Elena, please. I know we got off on the wrong foot. You called my mother a thief and implied I was a gold digger. I'd say that's more than wrong foot territory. He had the grace to look ashamed. I was angry. We all were. But maybe we can find a solution that works for everyone. What kind of solution? Alessandro sat across from me, his hands clasped. The estate is worth 47 million, but it's complicated. The businesses, the properties, the investments, they require management, expertise, connections. You don't have any of that. Get to the point. Sell it to us. We'll give you $10 million cash. You can go back to America, live comfortably, never worry about money again. And we'll manage the estate as mother intended. $10 million. It was more money than I could spend in several lifetimes. I could pay off every debt, buy a house, live in comfort forever, and give up everything my grandmother had built. Everything she'd wanted me to have. No, Alessandro's expression hardened. Be reasonable. You can't run these businesses. You have no experience, no education, no connections. I said, no, you're making a mistake. I stood, my mother's book clutched in my hands like armor. My mother made a choice. She walked away from all of this because she knew that some things matter more than money. You want me to believe that selling out to you is what she would want? That betraying the grandmother who tried, in her broken way, to make amends is the right choice? Your mother was a fool who died in poverty. The words hit like a physical blow. I moved before I could think, my hand connecting with Alessandro's cheek in a slap that echoed through the library. Get out. He stood, his hand on his reddening cheek. Rage and something else, fear, maybe in his eyes. You'll regret this, maybe, but I'll regret it on my own terms. After he left, I sat alone in the library and cried. Not from sadness, but from the weight of it all, the responsibility, the choices, the ghosts of two women I was trying to honor. Julia found me there an hour later. She didn't ask what happened, just sat beside me and held my hand. They're planning something, she said finally. I don't know what, but my mother and uncles have been locked in meetings for days. Secret phone calls, lawyers coming and going. They're not going to give up, I know. What are you going to do? I thought about my mother's hands, work-worn and gentle. I thought about my grandmother's final wishes, too late but still meaningful. I thought about everything I'd learned in 29 years of scraping by, fighting for every inch. I'm going to fight, I said. For both of them. For me. Julia squeezed my hand. Good. And for what it's worth, you're not alone. Not anymore. The confrontation came 3 days later, at a family meeting Bianca had insisted upon. Everyone gathered in the villa's grand salon, my uncles and aunt, their spouses, even some cousins I'd never met. Bianca stood at the front, every inch the matriarch. Elena, we've been patient. We've given you time to adjust, to understand the situation. But enough is enough. You're out of your depth, and this estate needs proper management. By proper management, you mean yourselves? We're family. We understand Mother's legacy, her vision. You're a stranger. I'm Lucia's daughter. That makes me family, whether you like it or not. Marco stood, pulling papers from his briefcase. We've prepared a very generous offer. $15 million and a small villa in the countryside. You keep enough to live comfortably and we take over the estate management. Everyone wins, except my grandmother's wishes are ignored. Our mother was sentimental at the end, Francesca said dismissively. Grief and guilt made her irrational. But we're practical. This is the best solution. I looked around the room, at these people who shared my blood but not my values. People who'd let their sister struggle and die rather than defy their mother. People who now wanted to profit from her death. No, I said clearly. I'm keeping everything. The villa, the businesses, the foundation. All of it. The room erupted. Voices shouting, people on their feet, accusations flying. Bianca's face went white with rage, then red. You ungrateful little enough. Julia's voice cut through the chaos. All of you. Just stop. Everyone turned to stare at her. Julia rarely spoke up, preferring to fade into the background. For once in your lives, listen, she continued, her voice shaking but determined. Elena is right. Nana chose her because she knew none of us deserved it. We stood by and did nothing while Aunt Lucia struggled. We never questioned, never reached out, never tried to make it right. And now we're angry that we're not being rewarded for our cruelty? Bianca started. No, Mama, I'm done being quiet. Julia moved to stand beside me. Elena is Nana's choice. And she's my choice too. If you want to fight her, you'll have to go through me. Silence. Then Alessandro laughed, cold and bitter. Fine, keep it all. But don't come crying to us when you can't manage, when the businesses fail, when everything crumbles. You're on your own, I always have been, I said. I'll manage. They left one by one, Bianca's parting look promising that this wasn't over. Only Julia remained, her hand still clutched in mine. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for showing me what courage looks like, she smiled through tears. Aunt Lucia would be proud. If this story is touching your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps me continue bringing these stories to life. Subscribe and stay with me for the journey. The legal battles began immediately. Bianca and my uncles hired expensive lawyers, filed motions, claimed my grandmother had been manipulated or mentally incompetent. They fought for months, burning through money and goodwill. But Mr. Chen had prepared for this. The will was ironclad, witnessed by doctors who'd confirmed my grandmother's sound mind. The investigations she'd conducted, the letters she'd written explaining her choices, all of it painted a clear picture. Vittoria Rossi had known exactly what she was doing. The courts ruled in my favor. Every time. Meanwhile, I took online courses in business management. I met with each restaurant manager, each building superintendent, learning the details of what I'd inherited. I was terrible at first, made mistakes, asked stupid questions, felt overwhelmed daily. But I kept going. Julia helped, teaching me about the Italian business world, introducing me to contacts, translating when my Italian failed. She quit her job at her mother's boutique and came to work for the foundation, channeling her energy into helping young women the way we'd never been helped. Slowly, impossibly, I began to understand what my grandmother had built. Not just businesses, but opportunities. Jobs for families, education for young women, beauty preserved in old buildings carefully restored. A legacy worth fighting for. 6 months after that first dinner, I stood in the villa garden at twilight. In my hands was a letter, yellow with age, that Signora Martinelli had finally given me. Dearest Elena, I will never meet you, and that is my punishment. I made choices, cruel, prideful choices that cost me my daughter. I told myself I was protecting her, that your father was wrong for her, that love wasn't enough. I was a fool. Your mother was the bravest person I knew. She chose love over comfort, struggle over ease, truth over lies. She died too young, worked too hard, suffered too much. And I could have prevented all of it with one word. Sorry, but I was too proud, too stubborn, too afraid of being wrong. Now she's gone, and I can never make it right. So I'm giving you everything. Not because you need it, though I know you do, and I'm sorry for that too. But because you're Lucia's daughter. You carry her courage, her strength, her capacity for love. You understand what she knew, that the things that matter most can't be bought or sold. Use this legacy to honor her. Build something beautiful. Help others the way I should have helped my daughter. And maybe, someday, you can forgive an old woman who learned too late what really matters. With love and regret, your grandmother. I read it twice, 3 times, until the words blurred with tears. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in my pocket, next to my heart. I forgive you, I whispered. Both of you. For everything. A breeze rustled through the garden, warm and gentle, carrying the scent of roses. And for just a moment, I swore I felt hands on my shoulders, one weathered and work-worn, one elegant and aged, both filled with love. 1 year later, I hosted the Foundation's annual gala in the villa. Young women in beautiful dresses, many of them scholarship recipients, filled the grand salon. Their laughter and hope transformed the space that had once echoed with anger and greed. Julia stood beside me, stunning in emerald green. Look at this. Look at what you've built. What we've built. I corrected. Aunt Lucia would be so proud. I hope so. I touched the locket around my neck. Inside was a photo of my mother on one side, my grandmother on the other. 2 women who'd never reconciled in life but were together now, in the legacy they'd both shaped. A young woman approached, nervous and eager. Miss Rossi, I just wanted to thank you. The scholarship, it changed my life. I'm studying medicine now. Because of you. Not because of me, I said gently. Because my grandmother believed in second chances. And because my mother taught me that love is always worth fighting for. As the gala continued, I slipped away to the garden. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. I sat by my mother's marker, my grandmother's letter in my hands. I did it. I whispered. I kept your legacy alive. Both of you. The businesses were thriving. The foundation had doubled its reach. The villa was filled with love and laughter again. And I, the daughter they'd thrown away, the granddaughter who'd never been wanted, had become the woman they'd both hoped I'd be. Not because of money or mansions or legacies written on paper, but because they'd taught me, each in their own way, that the most valuable inheritance isn't what you leave behind, it's who you become, in honoring those who came before. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If Elena's story moved you, please leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to hear more stories about courage, family, and the unexpected ways love transforms us. Until next time, remember, sometimes the people who throw you away are just making room for you to soar.